All right, guys, welcome. It is my pleasure to bring on Jen Gaskill, Director of Procurement at STS Construction, on today as our guest. Jen has been working in procurement for the majority of her professional career. And as you know, I really enjoy having guests like Jennifer on as we can really visualize her career climb, starting, of course, as a purchasing agent, then moving up to a manager, then senior manager, and now the Director of Procurement at STS. As I mentioned, not to mention the owner of Jag and Associates, who does procurement and consulting for the building industry. So with all that being said, Jennifer, welcome. Thanks so much today. Thanks so much for being on the Results Loading podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We're glad you're here. So Jen, with that being said, diving right in here, how did you end up in purchasing or procurement in the first place? As I just mentioned, you've had a long tenured career, really climbed the growth ladder, if you will, in procurement specifically. How did you get here in the first place?
Well, it's an interesting story. Back, in my early 20s, I worked for it was a venture capital company, but what they did is they provided the capital to builders, and our company would do all the processing, such as contracts, purchase orders, and the like for all the vendors that build the homes. At the time, it was homes, and then all the insurance requirements. A lot of the back end paperwork. So that was early 90s when I've gone from the contracts, purchase orders, all the way through purchasing agent, all the way. So I think it's an industry that I was interested in, and I just kind of fell into it, and then realized that, hey, this is one of those basic needs. Everyone needs a roof over their heads, right? A little did I know what I was in for as the years go by. But yeah, that's where I started, was the administrative side of it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people just fall into it, whatever their career course may be, and then ends up being this great tenure for them, such as what you experience, directing an entire company now in their procurement process. But yeah, no, I think we hear about that a lot. And over the course of your career working in this field, and having really a front row seat to the technological evolution of procurement overall, what ways have you found to optimize the procurement process as a whole, in your director position, for example?
For example, back then, early on in my career, everything was pretty much paper, a lot of paper, and you had to match and match and match. And then I remember the insurance certificates. You had to read every single one because they had specific words, double negatives that would remove the coverage, and if you didn't catch it, then it was a very cumbersome, stacks and stacks of paper, stacks and stacks of contracts. Now I see it's a lot more electronic. Like if there was a fire or something, we were in trouble, because hey, oh no, I mean, I'm dating myself here, but can you fax that to me? Could you? And then we didn't really have the electronic system like we do now, which has, and especially the bidding process. That's another one. When I was working for some of these big national builders, we would have stacks and stacks of plans, and it's not just one, like the architecturals, the MEPs, the Title 24, all, and these heavy sets of plans, and all the trades would have to come in and pick them up to bid on these jobs. And you can imagine what the cost was to print all of this. And now it's on an electronic platform, and it's so much more efficient, and it's much more cost effective as well, and it just gets done faster.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's really technology in a nutshell, the umbrella, if you will, across all industries. Much more efficient. We're saving tons of trees. You can email the bids to specific teams. You don't need the roofing team to come show up, and then the insulation team to come show up, and the electrical and plumbing. It's like, hey, check your email. I sent it over to you, and you don't need the whole document, by the way.
Yeah,
right?
It was a lot of work. It took time. It took, like you said, all those trees, and then, oh no, you have an old set. Ah, darn. Let's so as the project, the plans get updated, and then, oh hey, here's another set. Here's another set. It's just
Great. So Jen, given you've climbed the ranks, what skills do you believe are essential for success in a procurement specific role?
I would say detail, always being able to answer questions, like when upper management comes in and says, hey, where are we at with this job? You need to have that ready. And it's very important to keep it up to date. It's like a living document, right? Your budget. In this world, especially procurement, purchasing, you could have the greatest reputation throughout the industry, which I call, this industry is like a small town. Word spreads really quickly, right? So if you have a good reputation, you can completely derail it in 1 second, 1 minute. You can. So it's good. And then that's the other thing. I would say, having the detail and thinking quick on your feet. And then the other part of it is that's really helped me through the years is the networking and the relationships you build with vendors and all I call them our trade partners, because we need them just as much as they need us, even though we have the quote checkbook, right? And we're bidding out these jobs, some of them are $50 million, right? But we need them. If we couldn't do what we do without them. So
and you're talking strictly suppliers mainly, correct? The suppliers who are providing the components and materials necessary for you guys to go out and do what you do.
Not necessarily. Also the labor, like a plumber, an electrician, a framer, concrete guy. We'd prefer not to buy the materials and then have them install. It's too much management. We want them responsible for all the material, but we tell them what we want. Does that make sense?
So STS isn't actually buying any components themselves. You guys are so you're subcontracting out all the purchase. So you're, as the director of procurement at STS, you're basically going, and your procurement is essentially the general contractors at that point, correct?
Yeah, well, we are a general contractor. So our procurement is all the trades, like I'll say 52 of them to build a building. I'll say it's from grading to mirrors. So
right, but you guys aren't doing any of the actual purchasing. You go and you'll find like a concrete company, and it's like, this is what we need, buy it, and then we'll pay you for the labor and the execution, obviously.
Yeah, they procure the concrete, the rebar, and all that.
All of it themselves. Got it.
Yeah.
And at STS specifically, are you guys primarily residential, commercial buildings, anything and everything? What is that really looking like on a day-to-day for you?
STS, have you heard of the term micro units? We're in downtown LA, and we're the first builder to build those types of projects. So, like for instance, we have it's an 8,000 square foot lot in the middle of downtown, and there's 147 units. So so we're in this high density area building these units, and I'm part of specifying everything in the building too. The paint colors, the cabinets, countertops, plumbing fixtures, everything. But like we said earlier, I don't purchase them directly. However, I do negotiate pricing with the big vendors or the big manufacturers that we use, such as Moen, Sherwin-Williams, and the like.
All the big players. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And Jen, with that being said, in your view, what are the most significant trends you would say currently shaping the procurement industry right now? I mean, is it as simple as technology and AI, or does it go deeper than that?
I would say it's a little deeper than that. That's very important, as we talked about earlier.
As we discussed,
it's very efficient. Yeah. But also when it comes to the schedule and making sure our schedule is met, to us, the schedule is such a big deal, because if you don't finish the job on schedule, the interest rate is out of this world. Like if you don't hit that date, it's a huge monetary problem for our business, right? So it's really important. So the supply chain factor is very important as well. So like, for instance, I'll give you an example. Remember when all those ships were sitting off the coast, just sitting there?
Yeah, the Suez Canal, or when during COVID, when they're all off the coast
during
of like
COVID,
Long Beach trying to get in.
Yeah,
Yep.
that.
Yeah,
right
yeah.
around then. So to give you an example, our Finnish carpenter, so we specified a certain brand of locks, and we had to buy them, or they had to buy them 54 weeks in advance. It took them that long.
Gotta love a year-long lead time. Gotta love it.
So that became such an issue for us. And you better make sure you have extra on that order. Don't forget something, right? Because you're not going to get it. You're not going to get another one, right? In order to pass and all the whole thing. So that was going through that was something to experience. I'm sure we all did. Everything just stopped, and it trickled down to like every I think the whole economy, right?
That's a nice way of putting it, for sure. Something we experienced. I remember I had at my previous job, of course, before we started Prosperous, I had an order for like 10,000 monitors that the lead times were something ridiculous, like 60 weeks or something like that.
Yeah.
And they were here, they had arrived from China, but they were sitting in line off the coast of Long Beach, and my customers were going, where are they? And I'm like, they're right there off the coast. If you live in California, you could probably see the ship they're on. They just don't have a spot to get into the port for another 8 months maybe. And there's nothing we can do about it.
It was horrible. Yeah, it's not just that. It's imagine all of them.
Well, it was the same thing when the Suez Canal got blocked for however many weeks that was. I mean, shuts 80%, 90% of the freightways. I mean, the whole supply chain shut down. It's costing like billions of dollars per minute or whatever they said. It's like a gigantic problem. And so with that being said, Jen, before we dive too deep into that, is supply chain and supply chain optimization something that lands on your desk? And that's something that you need to forecast for? That sounds like it's a significant part of your day as the director of procurement.
Oh, for sure. We don't like surprises like that, for obvious reasons. Oh, you know what? And then the relationships we have with some of the big suppliers and manufacturers is key to that as well. Because if we're a good customer, we've been giving them business for years. It's one phone call. Hey, man, I got to have this tomorrow. I got it. And they work their magic because they want to keep the relationship going. So I can't express enough how important that is when it comes to when you're in a pickle, you know, and they come through for you. It's a big deal. It's a very big deal. Like you won't pass an inspection if you don't have what the inspector wants, right? And then it delays the job and da 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 da. So it's very important. And to have a good relationship with them, like I said, it's gold.
So it's even though it's not technically your direct responsibility, you need to stay on the suppliers to make sure, in terms of the forecasting, that they're going to deliver on time because you have dates that you need to hit. Yeah. Even though you're not sourcing the components and materials directly yourselves, you need to make sure that it's almost like you're doing a little bit of project management, making sure that everyone else beneath you is on top of their stuff. Otherwise, it'll blow a whole project. You get 4 weeks behind. That's costing you guys hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars.
Absolutely. Then making sure, did you order that switch gear? That's another one that was over a year. And then, oh, you want to expedite it. It's going to cost you 40 grand. And then you're like, well, it might be worth it to pay that. But then, oh, we don't guarantee it. It directly affects the job negatively and positively.
So on that same vendor and supplier subject, do you believe that the deep relationships, the long-term relationships, take precedent over supplier volume? Like, say some of your best vendors that you've been working with for like 15 years can't deliver. Like, what would you take? Like a vendor you've worked with for 15 years, or having like 4 or 5 backups, especially in like a COVID situation when it's like I love you, but I need this product now. Like, I'm sorry, I need to go with someone else. Like, what for you, what's more important in that situation?
Getting the job done. It is. And you know what? I always tell them, I'm like, I can't give you every job. That's not fair to everybody else putting in time. You know, and they usually do understand that they don't expect every single job, and especially if they can't perform. That is non-performance to me. Like, hey, if you can't meet the schedule, you can't meet what we need you to meet, then that's a problem for us. That's why we bid to, at least 5 vendors just to make sure they're all apples to apples. And when the numbers are all over the place, then there's something wrong somewhere.
Yeah, it's easy to sniff out the BS for sure.
It really is. Yeah, that's why you do that, because you got to be fair. Because that, again, if your reputation, that gets out there right away if you're not. And you're not going to be in the industry very long if you do that stuff.
Well, playing favorites doesn't really win you any love if you can get the job. I mean, it's getting the job done first and foremost, like you said.
Yeah.
I mean, relationships are great in specific situations, but ultimately, like, if you have an opportunity to get the job done quicker, not necessarily cheaper, but it's a plus if you can, then obviously that takes precedent over any relationship, no matter how long, correct?
Absolutely.
With that being said, Jen, like, as the director of procurement, how far are you challenging your suppliers to meet your like pricing, lead times, like any other parameters? I mean, do you find yourself sometimes having to tell them like, meet my requirements, or we'll have to go somewhere else, especially like in a world like construction, kind of what we just touched on? It's like, I have no choice. Like, you need even suppliers that you have a contract with. I mean, what does that look like for you in terms of the communication and dealing with these guys?
Oh, it's a big deal, because what I like to do is to make sure that they meet with me. They want to know, how many units are you going to build within this quarter, next quarter, and so forth. And I'll take it another level, and I'll say, hey, here's a schedule. Here's when we're going to need this stuff. So just make sure it's ready. Make sure we're in line to get what we need when we need it. And although that schedule does move, it does, but at least gives them an idea. Hey, those are STS's faucets, and no one can touch them. It's stuff like that it's key.
Really crucial. And what about like ERP systems, like your enterprise resource planning, keeping an eye on everything? How are you, I guess, given you don't have to do a lot of the direct procurement, that alleviates some of the lift on your shoulders, but are ERP systems helpful in terms of keeping all of this managed, given it goes top bottom, starting with you?
They are, because back in the day, there was no ERP systems. We had to do it all manually, and just trust that, okay, you ordered that, right? Yeah. It's on its way. Or that's happened before, where I call, I'm like, we good, right? And oh yeah, but then I haven't even ordered it. I found that out because, oh, we're not going to get it for 2 weeks. I'm like, no, that doesn't work. That's when I go to the manufacturer and say, look, they're like, he never even ordered it. So you're going to find out through the chain.
Yeah, one way or another.
Right. So, but the electronic, it's much more efficient, just like the bidding, just like the others. It's very helpful to track all that stuff.
And with that being said, even though you're not doing the direct procurement and the direct purchasing yourself, you're really just finding the vendors to go out and do the purchasing for you, given you have a project. How are you still, I mean, that's still tens of thousands of different components, dozens of spending categories. How are you overseeing all that and making sure that they stay in line and that you don't go, oh, shoot, I haven't paid any attention to roofing in like 6 weeks? Like, how are we preventing those situations from coming up, for example?
That's where the field team and the project managers, I do a lot of project management myself, but we do, our field team is key, because they are all about the schedule, and they're also calling and making sure, oh, hey Jen, they can put in the microwaves and the refrigerators, but the ranges aren't available for another blah blah blah. And then I'm like, that's not gonna work. You have to put in the entire unit. You can't just, oh, we'll come back in 2 weeks and do. It doesn't work. for anybody. So we work as a team, because like one person cannot do it themselves.
No way. Not in a million years. No, there's
No.
absolutely not. There's not enough bandwidth in a year, I don't think, to handle everything, especially in the industry that you work with. But what about like budgeting, for example? Like, how do you, if you get a project and you have it all budgeted out, how do you make sure that the vendors that you are contracting out stay within that budget? I mean, what if they come back and it's like, hey, I've budgeted X for appliances, and they come back, a few $100,000 over that price, or maybe it wouldn't be that much, but how are you managing the cost expectations that you guys set as the builder?
Yeah, what we typically do, like I'll give an example of appliances. Let's say we spent on a recent job. Let's say we spend, $5,000 per unit for the appliances, just round number. Then we will get budget bids from our vendors before we quote go out to bid. Our trusted vendors, and they'll give us budget numbers. So we're like, okay, we're right in there. And then knowing that they're not going to raise their price,
you got them locked in.
We'll sign a contract pretty quickly, even though they're not going to, like, the appliances aren't going to be put in till the end, right?
So it's almost like you're going out and like releasing RFQs before you even price out a whole project, just so you can get locked in, and then that'll help you determine what the cost of the project is actually going to be. Yeah. Interesting.
Yes. And
so you do it backwards almost.
Yeah. We kind of do it twice. We go out, for budget numbers, then we go out to bid.
Totally. And I want to talk a little bit about Jag. Jag is your company that you've owned for more than a decade, correct? Can you tell us a little bit about that? Is it a side project? Obviously, you have the expertise to be running procurement agencies such as Jag. Can you tell us a little bit about the genesis of that, and how it's doing, and what the day-to-day looks like over there compared to what you got going on at STS?
Yeah, it's more of a supplemental kind of a thing for me. It is basically like helping builders. Sometimes they need help staffing, or they have too much work. They just can't keep up with it. They have too many projects coming up, and they need someone that has experience that can just dive in. They don't really want to hire somebody, but they'd rather have like a consultant come in. And then other things, like sometimes if they need like a lawsuit or something like that, that's happened too. So it's just kind of an ebb and flow. Like, what do you need? What can I help you with? And I can help you write scopes. I can help you with contracts. I can help you, with bid lists and blah 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 blah. So it's basically a support kind of a thing for builders, developers.
Got it. So kind of like, Jen, you're a little bit of a hot commodity in the space. I mean, it's like if you could do everything yourself, you would. There's only one of you, unfortunately, but it sounds like you've got your fingers dipped in all the pools pretty much at this point with Jag and STS combined.
Yeah, it's a lot. It is. But when it comes to the Jag, is like it's not as consistent. It's not as consistent as I'd like it to be.
Mm-hmm. Is it just you, or do you have a team at Jag as well? Or is it kind of just you when you have, like you mentioned, ebbs and flows? I totally get that. Is it, depends on what's going on, you bring someone in to help if need be, or what does it kind of look like on the day-to-day?
I bring someone in to help me if it gets to be too much. And usually that's just kind of an administrator kind of a person, contracts, that kind of thing, getting things signed. Those the cumbersome things that seem to take forever to get done. But yeah, we're a small outfit, that's for sure.
Sure. Doesn't matter. I mean, most companies start small, and doesn't mean they're not powerful, as you know.
Yeah, right.
And Jen, to wrap up here, one of my favorite questions to ask, especially individuals such as yourself, who's really understands the industry, understands the market. What direction do you see the procurement industry going in the next, say, 5 to 10 years? Where are we headed? What is it going to look like? You've seen the evolution from when you started to today. What about the next 10 years? What do you think it's got in store for us?
Well, I'll start with this. I lived through, I'll call it the bloodbath in the mid 2000s, 2008, right around then.
Oh yeah.
I wasn't aware as much as I am now, but experiencing this, I see how like the interest rates and the economy and even election years and all that really affect what's being built, when it's going to be built, and it trickles down to all of us. So I remember during that time thinking every quarter, okay, here we go, here's another layoff. Departments that were consolidated. Oh no, now you have to do that department's job too. Oh yeah, we're going
For
to
the
lay
same
off.
pay.
And we're going to lay off all your support staff. So you got to still do it all. And just I learned a lot from it just by being thrown to the wolves, which I'm very grateful for. But at the same time, I'm hoping, I know right now it seems like the builders are just sitting there. Interest rates are affecting money for new projects. And I'm seeing that layoffs now. So I'm kind of seeing it again. But I hope that it's terrible to be at the mercy of this, but that's just the nature of the beast. Unfortunately, money drives this whole industry, and
Sure.
once that slows down, then everybody stops, and then people start getting laid off, and that. But
You got to wait for the market to reset and return to equilibrium,
yeah,
and then starts over.
On a positive note, the supply, like the housing, there's not enough housing. So you're kind of like at this double-edged sword here. There's a demand. In California, it's very difficult for people to qualify. So you got all these things going against you. And some of these builders are getting pretty creative with how they are trying to boost sales. But I like the apartment, the multifamily better, just because it's not driven on sales as much. Hey, you got a building, you got to finish it. When it's the sales part, you're kind of at the mercy of, okay, can we release another phase? No, just got to sit and wait. Or, oh my gosh, then, or you have to go. It's never a steady thing. It's either one or the other.
Yeah, I'm certainly glad I'm not in the home buying market right now in California. I would not want to be looking to buy a house at the moment.
Yeah, it's really like the interest rates are just a killer.
Well, not possible, especially for like people my generation in their late 20s and 30s. It's like next to impossible unless you have some sort of, I guess, financial support from whoever. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. You end up just renting, because it's what's viable for you.
It's a shame. It really is.
It is insane. And I guess the good thing is, in your industry, the more homes, the better, because here in Denver, there's a home shortage. Obviously, macro, Econ 101 driving the prices up. Not enough houses, too many people in need. So they're starting to develop areas all around Denver now, and trying to build like these communities, those developments with like 5 different floor plans, for example. And that's helping, but it's, as better than me for sure, it's what, 5-10 years before we start feeling differences like that in the price.
Oh yeah. But yeah, I just worry about the interest rates. I hope they start going down, and it kind of stirs things up, and hopefully things will start picking up again.
Absolutely, Jen. Fantastic. No, and I completely agree. Just as we kind of touched on earlier, the ebbs and flows of the industry, ebbs and flows of the market. There's a little overlap for you, I guess, in that capacity, but yeah, hoping things settle down and become more realistic for people to buy.
Yes.
So, Jen, thank you so much for such an insightful conversation. Really appreciated you having you on. Is there anything else you wanted to mention by chance before we wrapped up here at all that we didn't touch on?
No, I think we pretty much touched on everything. The only other thing was like the networking part. I didn't really get into that as much, but I will say when back with the bloodbath, the networking and the relationships I had with these manufacturers, vendors, and the like were huge in getting work when everyone's laid off, because they're like, oh yeah, I heard so and so's. I'll talk to them. It spreads. Hey, you that's how I would get work. I would get a job that way.
Certainly, it's a lot of it is about who you know. And that hasn't changed. Who is your network? Some people say you're only as good as your network. But yeah, no, I guess we should have touched on that more, but I couldn't agree more. Your last kind of tidbit there. And yeah, no, absolutely. Your network can make or break, a career stage for you without question.
Yeah.
So anyway, Jen, well, thank you so much for being on the Results Loading podcast. Really, really enjoyed this conversation, and looking forward to seeing where the market goes. I guess we'll have to stay in touch and keep an eye on it together.
Yes. No, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Absolutely, Jen. Thanks again.
Okay. Bye.